Welcome to Peacetime Story, a place where your mind can rest and your heart can find calm. Here, every story is told with love, comfort, and a touch of mystery, designed to gently guide you into a world of relaxation and peaceful sleep. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe and become a part of our Peacetime Story family. Together, we'll create a space where every night ends with calmness, comfort, and sweet dreams. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's journey. The Deadly Blood Trail, Hercule Poirot's story. Chapter 1. The gathering storm in the shadowed embrace of Blackwood Manor, perched upon the desolate moors of Devonshire like a sentinel of forgotten epochs. The year 1935 unfolded its dreary tapestry. The manor itself was a relic of Elizabethan grandeur, its weathered stone walls cloaked in ivy that whispered secrets to the relentless wind. Tall, mullioned windows gazed out upon the undulating landscape, where heather bowed submissively to the gathering tempest, and the distant sea crashed against jagged cliffs with a primordial fury. The air was laden with the metallic tang of impending rain, mingling with the earthy perfume of peat and salt, evoking a mood of profound melancholy, a harbinger, perhaps, of the tragedies yet to unfurl within those ancient halls. Lord Archibald Fenton, the manor's imperious master, had summoned his guests for what he proclaimed a weekend of scholarly discourse and convivial repose. At 58, Lord Fenton was a figure of formidable presence, tall and gaunt, his frame honed by years of arduous expeditions to the sun-scorched sands of Egypt and the fetid jungles of Mesopotamia. His hawkish nose, perpetually arched in disdain or contemplation, surmounted a thin-lipped mouth that seldom curved into mirth. Piercing blue eyes framed by wire-rimmed spectacles that perched precariously upon his aquiline bridge bore the intensity of one who had unearthed the treasures of pharaohs yet remained unsatisfied. His silver mane, swept back with meticulous care, bespoke a vanity undiminished by age. Psychologically, Lord Fenton was a labyrinth of contradictions, a polymath driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, yet plagued by a paranoia that saw rivals in every shadow. His occupation as an archaeologist had not only amassed him a fortune in antiquities, but had also cultivated enmities. Whispers abounded of disputed claims and betrayed partners, seeds of malice that might one day bear poisonous fruit. As the afternoon waned into evening, the guests arrived amid the first sputters of rain, their carriages crunching upon the gravel drive like the grinding of fate's inexorable gears. First came Lady Eleanor Fenton, his consort of 2 decades, who descended from her chauffeured sedan with the grace of a wilting rose. At 45, she retained a vestige of her youthful allure. Raven hair coiled into an elegant chignon, porcelain skin etched with the subtle traceries of discontent, and emerald eyes that shimmered with a latent fire. Her gown of emerald silk clung to her lithe form, accentuating a poise that masked inner turmoil. Lady Eleanor's psyche was a cauldron of suppressed passions. Once a vivacious debutante in London's glittering salons, she now endured the yoke of her husband's domineering intellect, her days filled with the hollow echoes of unfulfilled desires. Rumours murmured in the corridors of high society hinted at clandestine affections, a motive, perchance, rooted in the pursuit of liberation, be it emotional or pecuniary, from the manor's gilded cage. Dr. Elias Thorne, the family's trusted physician, followed shortly thereafter, his portly figure bundled against the chill in a tweed overcoat that strained at its buttons. 52 years of indulgence had rounded his once athletic build, leaving him with a balding pate fringed by unruly tufts of grey, bushy mutton chop whiskers that framed a florid countenance and small, shrewd eyes peering through thick bifocals. His jovial demeanour, often punctuated by hearty chuckles, concealed a mind adept at calculation and compromise. Thorne's psychological profile revealed layers of moral ambiguity. Burdened by escalating gambling debts from the card tables of Monte Carlo, he had occasionally skirted ethical boundaries, falsifying medical records to shield affluent patients from scandal, or perhaps to obscure his own indiscretions. His presence at Blackwood was ostensibly for Lord Fenton's annual health consultation, yet one could not dismiss the undercurrent of desperation that might propel a man to desperate acts. Miss Clara Beaumont, Lord Fenton's niece by marriage, arrived with the exuberance of youth, her motor car sputtering to a halt as she alighted in a flurry of lace and laughter. 28 and unencumbered by matrimony, she was a vision of sprightly vitality, slender and fair-haired, with wide hazel eyes that sparkled with mischief, a pert nose dusted with freckles, and cheeks flushed with the vigour of untamed ambition. Her attire, a modish frock of lavender chiffon, fluttered in the wind like the wings of a captive bird yearning for flight. Psychologically, Clara was a study in entitlement and impatience. Pampered intermittently by her uncle's largesse, she had grown accustomed to luxury, yet recent tidings of her exclusion from his revised will, in favour of endowing a grand museum, had ignited a smouldering resentment. The fear of descending into genteel poverty gnawed at her, transforming familial affection into a veneer over covetous intent. Colonel Reginald Sykes, an erstwhile comrade from Lord Fenton's days in the King's African Rifles, trundled up the drive in a weathered Bentley, his military bearing undiminished by the passage of time. At 60, he was broad-shouldered and ramrod straight, his weathered visage marked by a jagged scar that traversed his left cheek, a grim souvenir from the Boer War's bloody skirmishes. A bristling moustache of iron grey complemented steely eyes that surveyed the world with unyielding scrutiny. Sykes's psyche harboured the rigid discipline of a soldier, tempered by a festering grudge. During a joint expedition, Lord Fenton had claimed sole credit for a pivotal discovery, denying Sykes the acclaim that might have elevated his career. This betrayal, long nursed in silence, simmered like a dormant volcano, its eruptions potentially catastrophic. Mr. Victor Lang, Lord Fenton's business associate in the lucrative trade of antiquities, was the penultimate arrival, his sleek Daimler gliding silently to the entrance. 49 and impeccably groomed, with slicked back dark hair, a sharp jawline honed by cosmopolitan living, and piercing black eyes that absorbed every detail. He exuded the polish of a man versed in the arts of negotiation and intrigue. Lang's psychological depths revealed a ruthless ambition. A recent acrimonious dispute over profit shares from a Mesopotamian hall had escalated into veiled threats, his financial empire teetering on the brink of collapse should Fenton withdraw his patronage. Motive lurked in the shadows of avarice, where partnerships dissolved into enmity. Finally, overseeing the arrivals with unobtrusive efficiency, stood Mr. Harold Hargreaves, the butler's lanky form attired in flawless livery. 55, with high cheekbones, thin lips perpetually set in a line of inscrutability, and eyes like polished onyx that betrayed no emotion. He was the epitome of servile discretion. Yet beneath this facade lay a vault of concealed vendetta. Unbeknownst to the household, Hargreaves's family had suffered ruin decades prior, attributable to Lord Fenton's ruthless acquisition of their ancestral lands, a secret that festered like an unhealed wound. As the clock in the grand hall chimed 8, the guests convened in the opulent drawing room, and where a roaring fire battled the encroaching chill. Crystal decanters gleamed under chandelier light, casting prismatic shadows upon Persian rugs and oak-panelled walls adorned with artifacts, scarabs of lapis lazuli, urns of alabaster that spoke of distant conquest. Lord Fenton, at the room's centre, raised his glass of aged brandy. "My esteemed companions," he declaimed in a resonant baritone that commanded attention, "let us raise a toast to the glories of the past and the fortunes that await. May the storm raging without be but a fleeting shadow against the enduring light of camaraderie within." Murmurs of assent rippled through the assembly, glasses clinking like the fragile bonds of trust. Yet even as smiles were exchanged, an insidious draught seeped through the casements, carrying with it the chill of foreboding. The wind howled like a lament for the doomed, and in the flickering candlelight, faces assumed masks of politeness that concealed the turbulent psyches beneath. Unbeknownst to them, the gathering storm was not merely meteorological. It was the prelude to a symphony of deceit, where motives intertwined like the roots of ancient oaks, and the first drops of blood would soon trace their deadly path. Chapter 2. The Crimson Discovery. As the mantel clock in Blackwood Manor's cavernous dining hall struck 11, the evening's repast drew to a languid close. The guests, sated by a sumptuous array of roasted pheasant, truffled potatoes, and vintage Bordeaux, exchanged desultory pleasantries under the watchful gaze of ancestral portraits that lined the wainscoted walls. The storm outside had intensified, its gusts battering the leaded panes like the fists of an enraged titan, while thunder rolled across the moors in ominous crescendos. Rain lashed the estate with unyielding ferocity, transforming the manicured gardens into a quagmire of mud and rivulets, as if nature itself conspired to isolate this enclave of privilege from the world beyond. Lord Archibald Fenton, ever the autocrat of discourse, had dominated the conversation with tales of his latest expedition, a foray into the labyrinthine tombs of the Valley of the Kings, where he claimed to have unearthed a scarab amulet of unparalleled antiquity. His voice, resonant and authoritative, masked the undercurrents of tension that rippled through the assembly. Lady Eleanor, seated at his right, toyed absently with her pearl necklace, her emerald eyes distant, as though envisioning a life unencumbered by the manor's stifling opulence. Dr. Thorne, flushed from the wine, chuckled at intervals, his bushy whiskers quivering, yet his shrewd gaze darted furtively toward the host, betraying a mind preoccupied with matters less convivial. Miss Clara Beaumont, her lavender frock a splash of colour amid the sombre tones, laughed a trifle too brightly, her hazel eyes flickering with the impatience of one who anticipated inheritance rather than edification. Colonel Sykes, nursing a tumbler of scotch, interjected with gruff reminiscences of their shared campaigns, his scar twitching as he recounted a skirmish where Fenton's purported heroism had secured them victory, though his tone carried a subtle edge like a blade sheathed but ready to draw. Mr. Victor Lang, urbane and observant, leaned back in his chair, his black eyes absorbing every nuance, while Mr. Hargreaves, the butler, glided silently about the room, replenishing glasses with the precision of a metronome. his impassive face a mask over whatever tempests raged within. It was shortly past midnight when the first harbinger of catastrophe pierced the nocturnal hush. A muffled scream, sharp and ephemeral, echoed from the east wing, where Lord Fenton's private study nestled amid shelves groaning under the weight of ancient tomes and pilfered relics. The sound, though fleeting, carried the primal urgency of terror, slicing through the Manor's somnolent veil like a stiletto through silk. Miss Beaumont, whose chamber adjoined the corridor, was the first to respond. Her silk dressing gown hastily donned, her fair hair dishevelled in wild tendrils, she burst into the study, her hand flying to her mouth as the scene within unveiled itself in all its grotesque tableau. Lord Fenton lay slumped across his mahogany desk, a pool of viscous crimson spreading inexorably beneath his chair, staining the Aubusson carpet in a macabre bloom. A jagged trail of blood droplets meandered from the French windows, ajar despite the gale's fury, to the victim's inert form, suggesting a desperate stagger before collapse. The murder method was at once apparent and enigmatic, a deep incision to the throat, inflicted by a slender implement, perhaps the ornate letter opener that now lay absent from its customary place upon the blotter. The wound gaped like a silent accusation, the arterial spray having arced across parchments and artifacts, besmirching a priceless papyrus with the finality of mortality. Miss Beaumont's cry summoned the others in a cascade of hurried footsteps and alarmed inquiries. Lady Eleanor arrived next, her composure fracturing as she beheld her husband's lifeless visage. Archibald. Oh, merciful heavens! Who could have perpetrated such an atrocity? She murmured, her voice a tremulous whisper, though her gaze lingered momentarily on the open safe in the corner, its contents seemingly undisturbed or artfully rearranged to feign integrity. Her porcelain features paled further, yet there flickered in her emerald depths a shadow of something akin to relief, as if a burdensome chain had been unexpectedly severed. Dr. Thorne, roused from his guest quarters, bustled in with his medical bag, his rotund frame heaving from exertion. Kneeling beside the body, he probed the wound with professional detachment, his thick fingers steady despite the tremor that betrayed inner disquiet. "He's departed this vale, without question," he pronounced gravely, his mutton chops framing a furrowed brow. "The carotid artery has been severed. Exsanguination would have ensued swiftly, yet he contrived to traverse several feet, leaving this sanguine path. Curious, indeed. The blood's coagulation suggests the deed occurred not long ago, perhaps within the hour." Colonel Sykes, entering with military alacrity, surveyed the chamber through narrowed grey eyes, his scar pulsing with suppressed emotion, windows forced open, footprints in the sodden earth without, perchance. But in this deluge, any traces would be obliterated ere dawn. His voice carried the clipped authority of command, yet his hands clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening as if grappling with a phantom adversary from bygone betrayals. Mr. Lang followed, his sharp jaw set in contemplation, pacing the periphery with the acuity of a predator assessing its terrain. The tempest conceals much, does it not? And the will. Lord Fenton alluded to revising it this very eve, did he not? One wonders if avarice played a role in this grim pageant. His black eyes scanned the blood trail, noting its irregular splatter, as though the victim's movements had been erratic or contrived. Mr. Hargreaves, materializing like a spectre, closed the French windows with deliberate calm, the wind's howl diminishing to a mournful sigh. "I shall alert the constabulary forthwith, milady," he intoned, his onyx eyes impassive, though a subtle tightening of his thin lips hinted at depths unplumbed, perhaps a satisfaction derived from witnessing the downfall of his erstwhile oppressor. As the suspects congregated in uneasy vigil, red herrings proliferated like weeds in fertile soil. A torn fragment of lace snagged upon the window latch bore a resemblance to the trim of Lady Eleanor's shawl, evoking whispers of her involvement. Muddy footprints imprinted faintly upon the sill appeared oversized, directing suspicion toward the colonel's sturdy brogues. A misplaced glove, embroidered with Miss Beaumont's initials, lay crumpled near the desk, insinuating her proximity to the carnage. Yet beneath these superficial deceptions, psychological undercurrents eddied. Lady Eleanor's fleeting glance of composure regained too swiftly. Dr. Thorne's hands, tremulous as he withdrew them from the corpse, suggesting familiarity with death beyond mere vocation. Colonel Sykes's rigid posture, a bulwark against erupting fury. The room, once a sanctuary of erudition, now reeked of coppery demise. The flickering gas lamps casting elongated shadows that danced like conspirators. Timeline discrepancies began to emerge in hushed murmurs. Lady Fenton claimed to have retired at 11, yet a chambermaid recalled footsteps in the corridor thereafter. Mr. Lang professed to have been in the library, but the butler's log noted an unaccounted absence. Hidden motives lurked in the ether, pecuniary desperation for some, vengeful retribution for others, and secrets buried deeper than the moor's peat. As the distant wail of approaching sirens pierced the night, the guests exchanged glances fraught with accusation and dread. The crimson discovery had shattered the facade of civility, unveiling a labyrinth of deceit where every soul harbored shadows capable of murder. The blood trail, that insidious ribbon of fate, pointed not merely to the window but inward, toward the tangled psyches of those ensnared within Blackwood's cursed embrace. Chapter 3. The Arrival of the Little Belgian. The pall of dawn crept reluctantly over the moors of Devonshire, casting a pallid luminescence upon Blackwood Manor's brooding silhouette. The storm had abated to a sullen drizzle, leaving the ground sodden and the air heavy with the scent of petrichor, mingled with a faint, acrid tang of extinguished hearths. Within the manor, the constabulary had descended like a flock of officious crows, cordoning the study with ribbons of authority and subjecting the household to perfunctory interrogations that yielded little beyond platitudes and alibis. Inspector Hargrove, a burly man of middling intellect with a walrus moustache and a penchant for bluster, paced the drawing room, his boots thudding upon the parquet like the drumbeat of impending judgment. Yet, for all his diligence, the enigma of Lord Fenton's demise remained shrouded, the blood trail a mocking cipher that defied simplistic resolution. It was amid this atmosphere of stymied inquiry that Hercule Poirot made his entrance, summoned by a telegram from the late Lord Solicitor, who recalled the Belgian detective's involvement in a prior affair involving purloined artifacts from a Cairo dig. Poirot arrived by the mid-morning train, alighting at the nearby village station with the precision of a metronome. His diminutive frame clad in an immaculate overcoat of charcoal wool, his egg-shaped head crowned by a Homburg hat, and his moustache waxed to symmetrical perfection. His patent leather shoes, miraculously unsullied by the muddied paths, clicked upon the gravel as he approached the manor in a hired motor car, his green eyes, sharp as a falcon's, absorbing the scene with omniscient acuity. Monsieur l'inspecteur, Poirot greeted Hargrove upon entering the vestibule, his voice a mellifluous blend of French inflection and British courtesy. Hercule Poirot is at your disposal. The little grey cells, they have been alerted to this most lamentable affair. Pray, conduct me to the locus delicti. The inspector, momentarily discomfited by the detective's fastidious demeanour, complied with a grunt, leading him to the study where the body had been discreetly shrouded and the bloodstains congealed into rusty accusations. Poirot surveyed the chamber with methodical deliberation, his gloved hands clasped behind his back as he circled the desk, the blood trail, that crimson serpent winding from the French windows to the chair, drew his immediate scrutiny. Ah, the path of sanguine exodus, he murmured, kneeling to examine the droplets' irregular spacing and viscosity. Not a natural progression, no. The splatter, it lacks the organic chaos of a mortal stagger. Observe, here, the edges are too precise, as if augmented by artifice, and the dilution, perhaps with aqua, to extend its length and suggest intrusion from without. His fingers hovered above the carpet, tracing invisible patterns, while his mind dissected the scene's psychology. A killer desirous of misdirection, one versed in the theatrics of deception. Turning to the wound itself, Poirot lifted the shroud briefly, his expression inscrutable. The incision, clean yet superfluous. The carotid's severance would induce rapid demise, yet the victim's pallor suggests exsanguination, incomplete. And the letter opener, absent, you say, a weapon of opportunity or a prop in this grim charade. He noted the open safe, its papers undisturbed, yet a subtle disarray in the desk drawers hinted at a search conducted post-mortem. Physical clues abounded. The torn lace fragment on the latch, too conspicuously placed, muddy imprints on the sill, their depth inconsistent with the rain's erosion. A cryptic note clutched in the victim's hand, inscribed in a hand that mimicked urgency but betrayed forgery through ink that had not fully dried. With the preliminaries concluded, Poirot assembled the suspects in the drawing room, where the fire crackled fitfully, casting flickering illuminations upon faces etched with varying degrees of apprehension. Lady Eleanor Fenton sat rigidly upon a settee, her emerald eyes veiled by lowered lashes, her porcelain hands clasped in her lap like a supplicant. "Madame," Poirot commenced, his tone silken yet probing, "your union with the deceased, it was one of unalloyed felicity. No shadows of discord to mar the matrimonial bliss." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the window, where the moors stretched in desolate expanse. "We had our differences, Monsieur Poirot," she conceded, her voice a tremolo of restraint. "As all couples do." Archibald's obsessions with his relics often eclipsed domestic harmonies. Beneath her composure, Poirot discerned the psyche of a woman chafing against confinement, her motive perhaps entwined with emancipation, financial or amorous. Dr. Elias Thorne, ensconced in an armchair, mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his bushy whiskers quivering. "Doctor," Poirot queried, "you examined the corpus delicti, the wound, professional in its execution perhaps, or merely the fortuity of malice?" Thorne's shrewd eyes narrowed behind his bifocals. "A layman could have inflicted it, sir, but the blood loss, it was prodigious." His tremor, slight yet telling, betrayed a mind burdened by complicity. Poirot noted the absence of a vial from the physician's bag, a rare toxin, perhaps, whose symptoms might masquerade as hemorrhage. Miss Clara Beaumont fidgeted upon the periphery, her hazel eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Mademoiselle," Poirot addressed her, "your uncle's testament, it occasioned displeasure, no? The endowment to the museum depriving you of patrimony." She flushed, her freckled cheeks blooming. "It was unjust. After all I've endured." Her entitlement surfaced like a reef at low tide, her psychological profile one of petulant avarice, redolent with the potential for impulsive retribution. Colonel Reginald Sykes stood by the mantel, his military mustache bristling. "Colonel, old comrades share bonds forged in fire," Poirot observed, "yet grudges from the field, they linger like scars." Sykes's grey eyes hardened, his scar twitching. "Fenton took what was mine, glory, advancement, but murder, preposterous." His rigid psyche, armoured in discipline, concealed volcanic resentments from betrayals past. Mr. Victor Lang paced with feline grace, his black eyes vigilant. "Monsieur Lang, business is a battlefield," Poirot intoned. "Disputes over spoils. They escalate to enmity." Lang's sharp jaw tightened. "We quarrelled, yes, but to slay. I am no barbarian." His ambitious soul, Poirot perceived, navigated shadows where profit justified peril. Lastly, Mr. Harold Hargreaves lingered in the doorway, his onyx eyes opaque. "The faithful retainer," Poirot mused. "You observe all, yet divulge naught. A family slight, perhaps, from years agone." Hargreaves' thin lips compressed, his inscrutability a fortress against revelation. As interrogations unfolded, clues proliferated, a timeline fracture. Lady Fenton professed slumber at midnight, yet footsteps echoed in the hall. Psychological lapses, such as Thorne's intimate knowledge of a missing cyanide file, though the death seemed by blade alone. Red herrings abounded, the note implicating Sykes, its ink too fresh, a glove in Beaumont's chamber, planted to divert. Poirot, with his unparalleled grey cells, began to weave the threads. The blood trail's artifice suggested staging, the wound, perhaps post-mortem, to obscure toxicology. Yet the killer's identity remained veiled, the manor's secrets pulsing like a hidden heartbeat. The little Belgian's arrival had ignited the pursuit of truth, but the labyrinth deepened, each turn revealing misdirections, artful guise. Chapter 4. Shadows of Deception. The afternoon sun, a pallid orb veiled by lingering clouds, cast elongated shadows across Blackwood Manor's lawns, where the sodden earth squelched underfoot like the quagmire of deceit that enveloped its inhabitants. Within the manor's labyrinthine corridors, Hercule Poirot pursued his inquiries with the relentless precision of a horologist assembling an intricate timepiece. The air hung heavy with the residue of the previous night's tempest, mingled with a faint metallic odour of congealed blood that permeated from the sealed study, a olfactory reminder of the shadows that deception had cast upon this once stately edifice. As the investigation burrowed deeper into the psyches and secrets of the suspects, threads of hidden motives began to unravel, each revelation a silken strand in the web of malice. Poirot, ensconced in the library amid towering shelves of leather-bound volumes and curios from forgotten civilizations, pored over the physical evidence with his magnifying glass, its lens distorting the minutiae into revelations. The blood trail, that insidious crimson ribbon, yielded its first secret under chemical scrutiny, a diluted consistency, as if augmented with water from the nearby carafe, extending its length to fabricate the illusion of an external intruder's hasty egress. "Ah, the artifice!" Poirot exclaimed softly to himself, his moustache twitching with satisfaction. not the desperate crawl of a dying man, but the calculated brushstroke of a murderer intent on misdirection. The grey cells, they detect the dilution, the blood's hue too pallid, its flow too contrived. Further physical clues emerged like spectres from the gloom. In Miss Beaumont's boudoir, a search uncovered a bloody handkerchief, its linen stained with what appeared to be the victim's vitae, tucked surreptitiously beneath a jewellery box. Yet, Poirot's keen eye discerned the planting. The fabric's weave mismatched the household linens, and Miss Beaumont's alibi, corroborated by a locked door and a vigilant maid, rendered her implication spurious, a red herring sown to divert suspicion. Similarly, footprints etched in the muddied threshold matched the tread of Mr. Lang's bespoke boots, yet their pristine clarity, unmarred by the deluge's erosion, suggested fabrication rather than felony. Footprints that tread not in rain but in ruse. Poirot mused, his green eyes narrowing. Psychological clues proliferated, illuminating the turbulent undercurrents of the suspects' minds. Colonel Sykes, during a private colloquy in the billiard room, betrayed his rigid posture, cracking under Poirot's probing. As cues clacked against bays, the colonel recounted a wartime betrayal in the sweltering velds of South Africa, where Lord Fenton had abandoned him amid enemy fire to claim a strategic artifact for personal glory. Sykes's steely grey eyes blazed with suppressed rage, his scar pulsing like a barometer of fury. His psyche, forged in the crucible of discipline, harboured a vendetta that simmered perilously close to eruption. "He robbed me of honour, Monsieur Poirot," Sykes growled, his moustache bristling. "But to spill blood, that is the province of savages, not soldiers." Yet his clenched fist bespoke a soul, capable of transcending that boundary. Dr. Thorne, interrogated in the conservatory amid wilting ferns and the drip of condensation, sweated profusely despite the chill. Poirot's inquiries into the physician's ledgers, discreetly procured from his valise, unveiled escalating gambling debts, a vortex of desperation that had ensnared him in Monte Carlo's gilded snares. Thorne's moral compass, already askew from past falsifications of autopsy reports to shield affluent patrons, now pointed toward blackmail. Whispers suggested he had leveraged knowledge of Lord Fenton's fraudulent excavations against him. "Medicine is my vocation, sir," Thorne protested, his bushy whiskers quivering, "not malfeasance." But his psychological profile revealed a man teetering on the precipice, where ethical compromise blurred into criminality. Timeline inconsistencies fractured the suspect's narratives like fissures in ancient pottery. Mr. Hargreaves, the inscrutable butler, claimed to have been sequestered in the pantries at the hour of demise, inventorying silverware with metronomic efficiency. Yet a scullery maid's testimony, elicited by Poirot's gentle persuasion, placed him lurking near the study's oaken door, his lanky form casting an elongated shadow in the gaslight. Hargreaves's onyx eyes remained opaque, but his thin lips tightened, hinting at a vendetta rooted in familial ruin. Decades prior, Lord Fenton had orchestrated the acquisition of the Hargreaves estate through dubious means, consigning the butler's kin to penury. "Loyalty binds me, monsieur," he intoned flatly, yet his psyche pulsed with a slow burn of retribution, deferred. Lady Eleanor's affair with Mr. Lang surfaced through intercepted missives, concealed in a hollowed tome within her chamber. The letters, penned in fervent script, merged motives of passion and pecuniary gain. Her emerald eyes, when confronted, flashed with defiance, her porcelain composure cracking to reveal a woman ensnared by desire and the allure of independence. Lang, in turn, evinced a ruthless ambition, his black eyes calculating the profits from Fenton's demise. Business exigencies, nothing more, he demurred. But the timeline betrayed him. Both had been absent from the drawing room concurrently, their alibis intertwining like illicit lovers. Poirot, with his methodical intellect, began to mosaic the fragments. The stab wound, upon re-examination, appeared post-mortem, its edges too pristine for a living struggle. The true agent of death, a subtle poison, cyanide pilfered from Dr. Thorne's pharmacopoeia, administered in the evening's brandy decanter. The blood trail, a theatrical flourish, the victim's essence extracted and diluted to orchestrate the facade of violence, obfuscating the toxicological truth. The blade conceals the vial, Poirot confided to Inspector Hargrove, who nodded in bemused deference. Yet red herrings persisted, multiplying like shadows at dusk. A pilfered artifact, a golden scarab from Fenton's collection, materialized in Miss Beaumont's valise, implicating her in theft, if not murder. But Poirot discerned it as a decoy, its placement too overt for guile. Dialogues intensified in the Manor's echoing halls. "The heart, madame," Poirot addressed Lady Fenton in the solarium. "It leads us into labyrinths from which reason must extricate us. But the grey cells, they illuminate the path." She averted her gaze, her psyche a tumult of guilt and yearning. To Dr. Thorne, in the shadowed alcove, "Medicine heals, doctor, yet in errant hands it becomes the instrument of oblivion." Thorne's florid face paled, his shrewd eyes evasive. Suspects turned upon one another, alliances fracturing like brittle porcelain. Colonel Sykes accused Lang of fiscal chicanery. Miss Beaumont whispered of her aunt's infidelities. Hargreaves observed all with silent condemnation. The Manor, once a bastion of decorum, now reverberated with recriminations, each barb a veil over personal culpability. As twilight descended, cloaking the moors in indigo obscurity, Poirot retreated to contemplation, the shadows of deception lengthening. The puzzle neared completion, yet the killer's silhouette remained elusive, a phantom amid the miasma of motives and misdirections. The little Belgian's grey cells whirred inexorably, poised to pierce the veil. Chapter 5. The Revelation of the Grey Cells. As the gloaming descended upon Blackwood Manor, enveloping the moors in a shroud of indigo twilight, the assembled suspects convened once more in the drawing room, their countenances etched with the weariness of protracted suspense. The fire in the grate crackled sporadically, casting fitful illuminations upon the oak-panelled walls and the array of antiquities that now seemed like mute witnesses to human frailty. Rain pattered intermittently against the casements, a desultory remnant of the prior tempest, as if the heavens themselves mourned the unravelling of deceit. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive arbiter of truth, stood at the room's epicenter, his egg-shaped head inclined thoughtfully, his moustache a paragon of waxed symmetry, and his green eyes alight with the triumph of intellectual conquest. The air was thick with anticipation, each breath a prelude to the denouement that would shatter illusions and lay bare the perpetrator's soul. "Messieurs et mesdames," Poirot commenced, his voice a silken thread weaving through the tension. "Hercule Poirot has summoned you hither to illuminate the shadows that have cloaked this tragic affair. The murder of Lord Archibald Fenton was no crude act of passion, no opportunistic thrust of steel, but a meticulously orchestrated symphony of deception, where the apparent was but a veil over the arcane. The little grey cells, they have toiled without respite, dissecting the mosaic of clues, motives, and misdirections. Now, permit me to reconstruct the tableau of treachery. He paced with deliberate grace, his patent leather shoes whispering upon the Persian rug as the suspects shifted uneasily in their seats. Lady Eleanor Fenton perched upon the settee, her emerald eyes veiled by a veneer of composure, her porcelain hands clasped like a talisman against revelation. Dr. Elias Thorne, his rotund form ensconced in an armchair, mopped his brow with a linen square, his bushy mutton chops framing a visage flushed with apprehension. Miss Clara Beaumont fidgeted with her lavender skirts, her hazel gaze darting like a cornered fawn. Colonel Reginald Sykes stood rigidly by the mantel, his scar a livid streak upon his weathered cheek, his grey eyes steely yet shadowed. Mr. Victor Lang leaned against the wainscoting, his sharp jaw set, black eyes calculating every inflection. Mr. Harold Hargreaves lingered in the periphery, his lanky silhouette a bastion of inscrutability, onyx eyes betraying naught. Consider, if you will, the crimson trail, that sanguine serpent leading from the French windows to the desk. Poirot continued, his tone imbued with dramatic cadence. It bespoke an intruder, a desperate stagger, a violent intrusion amid the gale. Yet the grey cells demure, the blood's consistency, diluted, artfully extended with water from the carafe, revealed not nature's chaos, but a human contrivance, the droplet's placement too precise, too theatrical to be the effusion of a dying man. No, this was a ruse, a diversion to obfuscate the true modus operandi. A murmur rippled through the assembly, Lady Eleanor's lips parting in feigned astonishment. Poirot pivoted toward the physical evidence, gesturing with a gloved hand. The stab wound to the carotid, clean, efficacious, yet inflicted post-mortem. The edges lacked the inflammation of vital tissue. The arterial spray was simulated, drawn from the corpse itself. The letter opener vanished, a prop, discarded to bolster the illusion of spontaneity. The veritable agent of demise was subtler, more insidious. Cyanide, that swift harbinger of oblivion, administered in the evening brandy, a toxin pilfered from a medical repository. Dr. Thorne's bifocals slipped slightly, his shrewd eyes widening behind the lenses. Poirot's gaze fixed upon him momentarily, then swept onward. Motives abound, like vines entwining this manor's ancient stones. Lady Fenton, your matrimonial bonds chafed, did they not? Whispers of amorous dalliances with Monsieur Lang, letters concealed in hollowed tomes, bespoke a desire for liberation, pecuniary and passionate. The open safe, undisturbed, a glance too lingering, madame, betrayed your knowledge of its contents. She averted her eyes, a flush creeping upon her porcelain cheeks. Colonel Sykes, Poirot pressed, your psyche harbours the embers of betrayal from the Boer velds, where Lord Fenton claimed glory that was yours, abandoning you to peril. Your rigid discipline conceals a volcano of resentment, your scar, an emblem of wounds unhealed. Sykes's moustache bristled, his fist clenching. Mademoiselle Beaumont, disinheritance gnawed at your entitled soul, the museum endowment a bitter draught, the planted handkerchief in your chamber, a clumsy red herring, yet your alibi holds locked doors unbreached. Clara's freckled nose wrinkled in indignation. Monsieur Lang, ambition's ruthless acolyte, your disputes over antiquities' spoils escalated to threats, your empire teetering on Fenton's patronage, footprints matching your boots, fabricated, too pristine for the deluge. Lang's black eyes narrowed, a flicker of calculation. And you, Hargreaves, the loyal sentinel, your family's ruin at Fenton's hands, Land seized through chicanery, festered like a canker. Your presence near the study, attested by the maid, belies your pantry alibi. The butler's thin lips compressed, his onyx gaze unwavering. Poirot halted, his voice dropping to a resonant timbre. Red herrings proliferated, the torn lace implicating Madame, the forged note accusing the Colonel, the pilfered scarab in Mademoiselle's valise. Timeline fractures, footsteps in the hall, absences unaccounted, wove a tapestry of suspicion. Yet the grey cells discern the architect of this edifice, one with access to cyanide, proficiency in staging demise, and a motive cloaked in desperation. All eyes converged as Poirot extended an accusatory finger. "It is you, Dr. Elias Thorne. Your gambling debts, a maelstrom devouring your fortune, propelled you to blackmail, leveraging Fenton's fraudulent digs, falsified reports shielding investors' deceit. When he rebuffed further extortion and threatened exposure, you acted. The cyanide vial, absent from your bag, administered in the brandy during the repast's conviviality. Post-mortem, the stab to obscure toxicology, the blood trail diluted and laid with medical precision. Your tremor upon examining the wound, a psychological betrayal, the hands that healed now stained with murder. Thorne's florid countenance drained of color, his body slumping as if deflated. How could you know?" he stammered, the confession tumbling forth like a breached dam. "The debts, they crushed me." Fenton laughed at my pleas. "I meant only to frighten him, but the poison, it was irreversible." Gasps echoed, Lady Eleanor's hand flying to her mouth, Sykes' scar twitching in grim satisfaction. Poirot bowed slightly, his triumph tempered by melancholy. The grey cells prevail, restoring order to chaos. Justice, though tardy, is inexorable. As Inspector Hargrove advanced with manacles, the room dissolved into murmurs, the shadows of deception dissipating like mist before dawn. Blackwood Manor, its secrets exhumed, stood sentinel once more, the moors whispering of follies past and the inexorable march of truth.